Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be finishing up our series on Lewis's Trilemma, the liar, lunatic, Lord argument, with a video on Jesus was a legend. Now, C.S. Lewis argued that Jesus was either a liar, a lunatic, or God. Arguably, the most common response to this argument is the one that we've saved for last, that this is a false trilemma, i.e. that there are other things that Jesus could have been that are consistent with him being a great moral teacher. These views are heterogeneous and different, but we will look at them all under the category of the common claim that Jesus was a legend, i.e. the story of Jesus was just that, a story. Not all of these views in this video take that particular tact, but all of them object to the claim that this is a trilemma. In other words, all of the objections here argue that there is some other option beyond liar, lunatic, or Lord. Many of them don't say that Jesus was a legend, but we're classifying them all under this just for the sake of alliteration. Now, the legend form of this objection claims that Jesus was nothing more than a myth. He never existed, that the books wrote about him were simply lies used to promote this breakaway sect of Judaism called Christianity. Or, at best, they were a mythology in the same way that Greek myths were a mythology. They were stories and parables that people used to derive lessons and meaning, but not ever meant to be historical facts. The books of the Bible were written around a century after Jesus died by people who never knew him, so it seemed at least plausible. If Jesus was a real person, why was there nothing written right after his death by anyone that actually knew him? If you were trying to convince people to join a new religion, you would set the origin events long enough in the past so that no one, particularly in the ancient world when people had short lifespans, could really check to see if you were telling the truth. And it's not like they have mass communication or that people traveled that much, and so if you said, oh yeah, this thing happened in a village 2 towns over, no one's going to go there and check because they can't, because most people don't move around. If Jesus never really existed, then there'd be no one to dispute these claims. Unlike Jesus, who we might think could not have been a liar since he would have recanted before his death, the authors of these books faced no such punishment, and in fact had everything to gain from promoting the story of a divine founder of their religion. Given that they already have this religion that they're promoting, it's more useful for them to promote the story that the founder of that religion was divine. Some people that defend against this claim that the people that are promoting this story did have everything to lose from promoting Jesus as a divine founder of the religion because they faced persecution. Well, the argument against that would be that ancient Jews were facing persecution regardless, and people that were trying to start this religion of Christianity were facing persecution whether or not they said their founder was divine. And so adding that only had the benefit of getting them more followers. It didn't have any detractions of making them more likely to be discriminated against. They treated Jesus as something like Plato treated Socrates, having him espouse the best arguments for their ideas and promoting the claims of their religion, instead of faithfully documenting history. If Jesus was a myth, then it seems like you could still take real moral lessons from him, in the same way that fiction can teach us moral lessons. A character in a book or a movie doesn't need to be real to be a great moral teacher. In fact, the simple fact that they are fictional may make them a better moral teacher, since they can be made to do or say exactly the right thing in a way that a non-fictional character cannot. There's some debate in philosophy as to whether Socrates is a real person, but even if he were completely an invention of Plato, it would not invalidate the claims that Plato made using Socrates, or Plato's moral teachings. Similarly, if Jesus didn't exist and was merely a fiction, it wouldn't invalidate his claims about morality, only those about his own divinity. As with the other arguments, the point here is not to prove that Jesus didn't exist, but rather to show that this is at least a possibility, and if it's even a possibility, Lewis has presented a false trilemma. The next possibility is that Jesus did exist, but that he did none of the things that he was claimed to do, or that he didn't do a lot of them. Maybe he argued for everyone to love each other, but didn't make any theological claims about being a prophet, being the Messiah, speaking to God, knowing what people should do to get into heaven, etc. His later followers, nearly 100 years later, realized that preaching about peace and love was not enough to win hearts and minds. They needed to make claims that Jesus was preaching a gospel in order for his teachings to take root. They exaggerated his claims to gain followers, something that's consistent with the fact that many Gospels of Jesus were omitted from the Bible, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Mary, and so on. It makes the construction of the Bible look more like a PR exercise in finding all of the good stories about Jesus and none of the bad ones than a historical one. Once again, this would be consistent with Jesus being a good moral teacher. It's not his fault that people exaggerated his claims 100 years later. And it would track with the viewpoint taking off globally, as his followers had a plan to lie and exaggerate his claims in order to spread the word. Once again, as long as it's possible that the Bible is an exaggeration, this is an option open to the non-Christian that thinks Jesus is a good moral teacher. Remember that Lewis's argument is targeted against the non-Christian, someone who explicitly does not accept the truth of the Bible. And so, not accepting that some more elements of the Bible are true than fewer seems completely consistent for this person. Some have argued that Jesus was a guru. This response is categorized in several different ways, but most commonly it's categorized as Jesus claiming divinity in a very non-specific way. In effect, according to this response, in saying that he was God, he meant that God is in everything, that you are God, that I am God, that everything is God. And so when he claims divinity, he's saying that everything is divine. When he says that God is his Father, he's saying that God is the Father of everyone. If it's possible that that's what he really meant, and that in claiming divinity, Jesus was simply claiming that all things are divine, then it seems like a viable alternative to Lewis's trilemma, and would certainly not make him unfit for the title of moral teacher. If he was claiming that everything was divine, then someone that is perhaps more spiritual, that is theistic but of another religion, might say, yeah, okay, he was telling the truth. He was saying something that's true, that everything is in some way divine, and we can accept his moral teachings without thinking he was a liar or that he was a lunatic, but also without thinking that he was a Christian God. Now, the most common objection made to this argument, often from the evangelical Christian community themselves and the apologetics community themselves, is that Jesus never actually claimed to be divine. Many Christian scholars, such as Bart Ehrman, argue that Jesus never claimed to be God or the Son of God, and that the statements in the Bible are being misinterpreted and misunderstood. Lewis's argument falls flat because its central conceit is simply false. Lewis was never a biblical scholar and didn't actually understand or read much of his Bible. Jesus did not claim to be divine, and so even if he was not insane or a liar, there's no reason to think he was God because he never claimed that he was, according to this argument. Some, including the apologist William Lane Craig, have objected to this argument, claiming that it ignores the possibility that Jesus is a normal prophet or the Messiah of Israel alone, but not God. When William Lane Craig is critiquing your argument for God as a theist, you have some problems. Several religions make such a claim that Jesus was simply one of many prophets, Islam, Mormonism, etc. It seems like there's at least a possibility for the theistic non-Christians who respect Jesus' teachings but don't think that he was God to take this route. The last possible response we will give is possibly the most obvious. If you say, John is at the store, it's possible you're lying and you believe John is at home. It's possible that you're crazy and John is your imaginary friend and so isn't anywhere. Or it's possible you are telling the truth and John is actually at the store. But there's another possibility, that you are honestly mistaken. That John told you he was going to the store, but actually his car broke down and he's stuck on the side of the road. This is, in my mind, the clearest and most obvious tact that anyone can take, that someone doesn't have to be crazy or a liar to say something that's false. They can be honestly mistaken. Similarly, it seems at least possible that Jesus was honestly mistaken, that he truly believed he was the Messiah, that he was not insane or a lunatic. He just thought that he was God. Maybe he had dreams of God speaking to him. Many people have all sorts of crazy things that happen in dreams. Maybe everyone around him told him he must be the Messiah, and he believed them. Maybe he was a bit full of himself and thought he must be very important, and so he was God. It seems like there are many reasons you might think that it's at least possible that Jesus was honestly mistaken about being God. As we've shown in this series, this trilemma that many apologists think is, quote, the best argument for Christianity is anything but. In this series, we've given over a dozen alternatives to these three options and shown that even apologists and Christian scholars think that this is a bad argument for Christianity because at its core, it's a false trilemma and because it misrepresents the historical evidence. What do you think? Are any of these other options possible? Or are there only three options for what Jesus could have been? Are there any other apologist arguments you think we should take on? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.